Call the guests. Everybody else did here. James Etheridge, lead us in the national anthem.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tom West, lead us in
regarding goodwill and love friendship. Let us pray. Father in heaven, whose will it is that all your people should work together, well together in harmony. We give you, excuse me, thanks for the opportunity that we find in Rotary to widen our sense of friendship. We are grateful for the new friends that we have come to know and for whom we share. Give us patience in dealing with those who are sharp and dull. Give us creativity in finding ways to express ourselves, which we will build better relationships. And Lord, give us sense of a sense of humor that we do not take ourselves too seriously. Bless this club and its activities and its outreach in our own community. Amen.
Amen.
Family of Rotary. Yeah, friend, maybe. Mr. Reed Rocker.
Y'all just thought y'all got rid of Lee on the voice, didn't you? I'm back. I'm always coming back. All right. Everybody's football team won this weekend, I think, except for Troy. It's close though. We pulled out a good game. Birthdays, Cal Whaley, September the 9th, turned 21 again. Gregory, September the 13th. And I can't say you turned 21 because we're way away from 21. But God bless you. We love you. Anniversaries, Tanner, Shelley, and Amelia on September the 13th, and Bob, Caputo, and Julie Caputo on September the 13th. I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if, a little email this morning, make sure you do a special prayer this afternoon after we leave for Kelly Pyle. Her husband had, and I could be incorrect on the information, so don't fix it the fire, but I think he had a slight heart attack earlier in the week. And I think he's had another one, but he's at the UAB, and I think he's fixing to have open heart surgery this morning. So I hope I'm correct on the information that I got, but y'all keep them in your prayers and her family in your prayers. Thank y'all. You'll have a great day.
Thank you, Rick. Introduction of guests and visiting Rotarians.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the privilege of introducing 15 guests today.
All right.
So I think this is a better day, certainly since I've been here. This is the most number of guests I remember, so thank you all for coming. If you wouldn't mind, when I call your name, to stand and just remain standing till I finish all 15. Okay, so the first one is Graham Bishop, who is a guest of Mike Goodman. Thank you, Graham. Chris Dupree, a guest of John Watson. Thank you. Dr. Garnick Askew, a guest of Stephanie Walker. Thank you, Dr. Askew. Dr. Kathy Murphy, who is a guest of Dr. Linda Young from Wallace College. So the rest are all guests of the club. Mason Bynum, who is Sheriff of Dale County. Thank you, Mason. Tony Helms, who's Sheriff of Geneva County. Thank you, Tony. Bill Rafferty, Houston County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Bill. Jeff Carlisle, Houston County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Jeff. Blake Turman, Covington County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Blake. Jackie Hornsby, Attorney General's Office. Thank you, Jackie. Larry Anderson, retired judge of Houston County. Thank you, Larry. Thomas Hutton, Attorney General's Office. Thank you, Thomas. Benjamin Lewis, District Judge of Houston County. Thank you, Benjamin. Chris Richardson, Circuit Judge of Houston County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Chris. And then Aaron Finn, who is a guest of Pauley. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Fred. Now, Kim Aston, Josh Chapman. Today we have 492 reports.
Oh, this is good. Yeah. Get a picture of that. No, but I'll go here. Right.
Thank you, Josh. The last three numbers, winning ticket is 181, 181.
Oh, it is a good one.
It's all charity, baby. You can cut the video.
7 clubs. Thank y'all. Take a moment for Rotary Minute. You know, each month, the Rotary year has a theme. Theme of September is basic education and literacy, which usually brings to mind ensuring children have an education and learning skills that will support them later in life. Interestingly, there are several facts you may or may not know. More than 776 million people over the age of 15 in this country, in the world, are illiterate. That's 17% of the world's adult population. Rotary goal is to strengthen the capacity of communities to support basic education and literacy, reduce gender disparity in education, and increase adult literacy. We support education for all children and literacy for children and all adults. Rotary members work worldwide to fight adult illiteracy by working with local advocates to offer community literacy programs. Now, on the side note of that is, most of us know we work with the third grade dictionary project. We may, as a club, may or may not realize we were approved for a grant to provide dictionaries this year. Robert's not here today. I don't know if we've gotten a check for it yet, but we have been approved for the funds to pay for the dictionaries this year. They will not be coming out of club funds. Once those are ordered, we will set up time and receive. We'll set up time that we can have those labeled and delivered. And I appreciate everything everyone does. Just basic announcements. As you're aware, we did complete our school supply drive for Jard Elementary, West Goldston, Will Goldston. The Outlaw Club is helping to coordinate delivery of that. That's coming up. We still have not delivered. If anybody else would like to add to that, please let us know. You have the White Elephant sale coming up. in the next month, and Purple Pinky Drive coming up as well. Today's program is Attorney General Steve Marshall, brought this by Art Solid. Program,
Thanks, sir.
sir.
President, fellow Rotarians, it is my honor to introduce to you the 48th Attorney General to the state of Alabama, Steve Marshall.
Everybody, talking to the judge earlier, cannot drive down here without thinking about J.B. Beasley, Tracy Hallett. Many of you know I had the privilege of being in Mason Circuit trying that capital murder case now. It's been over a year and a half ago. But as I travel into the Wiregrass, I think about two precious young girls whose life was taken from them many, many years ago. And we're pleased to be able to get the result. But it's that reminder to me is to see our four sheriffs here and others in law enforcement, the diligence of law enforcement continues to work to be able to provide justice. As we all are probably struck by what took place just yesterday in Auburn, 2 days ago in Auburn. It's that reminder of the important role that law enforcement plays and the beauty that I have as a prosecutor now for 30 years of my life to be able to work directly with them. And so, man, thank you for all that you do. By the way, this is the safest place in Alabama today, right? I don't know about Covington and Geneva and Dale County since they're gone, but grateful for them being here. And thank you all for taking time to allow me to be able to come visit with you today. And honestly, I want to do something a little bit different. I'm happy to be able to answer questions a little bit about what's going on in the state and answer what legal questions you may have about what we're involved with. But I'm kind of going back a little bit to my academic roots because I was at the University of North Carolina, an American Studies major, completely impractical major, right? Didn't prepare me to do anything truly in life, but there is this connection I have to art history and to this nation that is profound for me. It was what kind of inspired me to be able to do that work academically. And even today, I think my interest, eventually becoming a lawyer in our judicial system, is founded in this idea of who we are as a nation. And so what I really want to talk about today, I think it's also a little bit of a reflection to me of what Rotary Club is about. It's about unity. It's about coming together for a common purpose. It's to really talk about what is a common bond of everybody in this room, and that is that we are tethered to a nation that created certain fundamental freedoms, like the ability to gather freely in a place like this, the opportunity we have to express our opinions without reservation, or even the chance that we have to be able to worship without restriction. Because the reality is that it's because of those fundamental freedoms and others that allowed this to be the greatest country in the world. And so I want to talk a little bit about it. Maybe you haven't thought much about it, is what we can do individually and collectively to be able to celebrate what's coming. And that is the 250th anniversary of the founding of this nation through the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Think back to 1776, it was 56 courageous men who gathered in the city of Philadelphia to sign that document that not only became the birth document of our country, but it also became the most fundamental statement of individual liberty in this world's history. And let me begin with familiar words I think that we all could recite from memory, but it's, I think, a good starting point for where we're going to go. And it began with, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I don't know whether you realize that those words were written by Thomas Jefferson at the tender age of 33 years of age, but they're all familiar to us. We learned them in school. We recited them at patriotic moments in which we participated in. Perhaps you're like me, that far too often you have taken those words for granted. But y'all, in 1776, those words were nothing short of revolutionary, because they were a defiant proclamation to kings and emperors, a bold assessment that our rights will derive not from government, but from our Creator, and with a reminder to those in power that governments exist only by the consent of the governed. And in just a little over 1,300 words, Thomas Jefferson crafted what remains one of the most powerful declarations of human rights ever written. It reads like an indictment, and it includes the list of grievances against the British Crown, but instead, it was really more a rejection of tyranny and a vision for a society built on principles of justice and liberty. And y'all, those who were gathered in that sweltering hall in 1776, we kind of see them as faces on a portrait or maybe even statues that adorn some government building. But let's remember who they were. Flesh and blood patriots, they were statesmen, they were farmers, they were merchants, and even, God forbid, some lawyers who knew that by signing their names on that document that they were standing against the most powerful empire in the world. They faced the gallows, but yet they acted with a unique and a noble vision, trusting in the righteousness of their cause. A little bit about the diversity of those men. The youngest was 26 years of age, barely older than some of our college students, Edward Rutledge from South Carolina. The oldest was one we're more familiar with, Benjamin Franklin. Man, at that time, 70, he'd already lived a lifetime of diplomacy and invention, but each was willing to risk it all for a free nation. They weren't guaranteed success, and in fact, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, knowing it could cost them everything. And for some, it did. 5 were captured by the British and tortured as traitors. Several saw their homes burned, their fortunes seized, several lost their lives, but yet it was their courage that has continued to light the spark that we've had as a nation for over 250 years. Now, John Adams kind of saw what was coming, and when asked, he foretold what and how we would mark Independence Day. He said that we would do it with pomp and with parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations. We see that in Alabama, right? With fireworks displays over our cities or parades in many of our towns. But as we approach our nation's semi-quincentennial, by the way, y'all, I got that right. I've been practicing that term. But as we celebrate that anniversary, we're called, I think, to do more than simply celebrate with festivities. I think we have to reflect on the deeper meaning of the Declaration. It's a promise that this nation would be a beacon of liberty, justice, and equality, because it didn't just declare our independence. In fact, it inspired. And what it set into motion was the birth of the nation that would reshape our world's history. It went beyond our shores because it inspired revolutions in countless nations across our country. Abraham Lincoln drew upon its principles in his Gettysburg Address, calling for what he described as a new birth of freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of Lincoln Memorial and invoked that declaration's promise of equality as I have a dream speech. And today, over 100 nations have modeled their governance on the principles contained in that declaration and in our Constitution. But it was more than simply a break from Britain. It was a covenant with our people, because it promised a nation that we would strive toward liberty, justice, and equality for all. And y'all, truth be told, that promise wasn't fully realized in 1776, because at that time the vision didn't extend to enslaved people, to women, and some others. Yet the genius of the Declaration of Independence is derived in its aspirational nature. It planted a seed that's grown through the sacrifice of countless Americans to the abolition of slavery, the suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, and the ongoing work that we continue to have today to make our founders' vision a reality. As we stand on the cusp of our 250th year, we must acknowledge how far we've come, but yet how far we continue to need to go to meet that noble goal. So what does this 250th milestone mean for us today? It means that the words from 1776 are more than just history. They're a challenge to ensure that our nation remains a place where freedom is protected, where justice prevails, and where every person, regardless of background, has an opportunity to pursue their dreams. As Attorney General, I see that challenge in my everyday work, because we're tasked with defending the rule of law, protecting our state sovereignty, and ensuring the rights in our Constitution, both state and federal, are upheld for our citizens. But it's not the task for public servants alone. It's a responsibility as citizens we all share in this great republic. Because we know in Alabama that we are good about rising to challenges. From the fields of the Black Belt to the industries of Birmingham, from the Wiregrass to Tennessee Valley, Alabamans have always been builders. Builders of communities, of families, of a future rooted in faith and freedom. And this Rotary Club embodies that spirit. Your motto, service above self, echoes the selflessness of those 56 signers who put the cause of liberty above their own safety. Your work, whether supporting local schools, aiding those in need, or fostering economic growth, reflects the same civic engagement that Alexis de Tocqueville observed in 1831, when he marveled at the voluntary associations that made Alabama and America strong. You are the living proof that the American experiment thrives not because of government alone, but because of citizens who take the responsibility for their communities. As we approach 2026, we have to be honest about the challenges we face. Our nation has clear divisions, sometimes torn apart by competing visions of what America should be. We see threats to the principles that define us, threats to free speech, to religious liberty, and the right to bear arms. We see efforts to centralize power in some ways that could undermine federalism that wouldn't allow states like Alabama to govern according to its values. As Attorney General, I've had to fight those battles, whether it's challenging federal overreach or defending our laws in court. But the fight for freedom is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us who believe in the promise of America. I think that 250th anniversary calls us to action in three ways. First, it calls us to remember. I think it's absolutely vital that we teach our children the stories of 1776, not just as history, but as lessons in courage and conviction. We must remind our children that the Declaration and the Constitution are not relics, but instead living documents guiding us still. Here in Alabama, we can share those stories of our own contributions to the American story, from the soldiers who fought in Yorktown to the pilots trained in Fort Rucker who carried freedom's banner across the world. Second, this anniversary calls us to recommit to the rule of law, to the idea that no one is above it, not the powerful, not the wealthy, not the government itself. Recommit to the principle that our rights are sacred, but so too is our duty to one another. And finally, this anniversary calls us to look forward. In 2026, we have a chance to set the tone for the next 250 years. Asking ourselves simply the question, what kind of nation do we want to be? I believe we want an America that remains a beacon of liberty, where hard work is rewarded, where faith and family flourish, and where every citizen has a voice. In Alabama, we're doing our part. Our state is growing economically, culturally, and in spirit. But we must continue to work at fulfilling that Declaration's promise, ensuring that every Alabamian, every American can share in the blessings of liberty. To Attorney General, I've seen the strength of our people up close. I've met the farmers in Macon County who rise before dawn to feed our nation. I've met teachers in Montgomery who inspire the next generation. I've met veterans in Huntsville who carry the flag of freedom to distant land. What unites them and what unites us is a belief that there is something greater than ourselves. That belief carried us through a revolution, a civil war, 2 world wars, and countless other challenges. It will, I believe, also carry us into the next century. My challenge to you as members of this Rotary Club, as Alabamians and as Americans, is to live every day in a way that would make those 56 signers proud. Building a community, a state, and nation worthy of their sacrifice. By getting involved in the state and national efforts to commemorate this 250th anniversary, the community projects, educational initiatives, or simply by sharing the stories of our founding. In Alabama, we're already planning events around our state, and I hope that you will participate and enjoy by bringing your energy and vision to those efforts. Let's mark a 2026 celebration, not just of what we've done, but what we can do together. So let me conclude these thoughts by returning to the words of Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident. These truths, which we referenced almost 250 years ago, remain our inheritance, our responsibility, and our hope. The 56 men who signed that declaration didn't know their experiment would succeed, but they had faith. in God, in each other, and in the idea of America. 250 years later, we stand proof of that vision. We're not perfect, but we're resilient. We're not without flaws, but we remain relentless in our pursuit of a more perfect union. As long as we hold fast to the principles of liberty, justice, and equality, America will remain strong and flourish for another 250 years and beyond. Now, I'm going to stop there and try to take some questions about what may be on your mind, but I would be remiss if I didn't say a special thank you to Tom Sorrells, who's here. He invested a whole lot of time and effort in a young prosecutor who, in 2001, had the greatest privilege of his life of being able to work alongside law enforcement and trying to keep the community safe. Tom, you have remained a beacon for me of what it means to be a public servant, and I want to thank you for all that you've done to help me serve this state better. So y'all, if I'm doing anything good, give me the credit. If I'm not, blame Tom for not doing a better job training me along the way. All right, with that, I'm going to take a moment and be happy to answer any questions about what's going on in this. Yes.
What's the status of the redistrict?
Yeah, we're very encouraged about the direction where that's going. A little bit of history there, and I'll say there's two separate cases going on, but the one I think that's most important here is some out of their federal judge believing that the Wiregrass and Mobile Bank are anything directly in common. I think you saw that we fought that battle and lost initially. There is a case that has traveled to the Supreme Court from the state of Louisiana, the Calais case, that has shown very clearly the confusion that the Supreme Court has created in redistricting, because in Louisiana, as a result of the similar laws that we had in Alabama to the Voting Rights Act, they drew a district that has no continuity of sort of counties together and what they refer to in that vernacular as communities of interest. They did something to satisfy the wishes of the federal court. They were challenged by not those who advocated for that district, but others who said it diluted the voting power of the people of Louisiana. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. They were actually supposed to decide it last term. And in a very unique circumstance, the court did not decide, but instead asked for additional briefing around the question about whether or not it's constitutional to create a very specific majority-minority district, and allowing not only the parties, but also others, including the state, who led the brief, to be able to weigh in. The fact that they didn't decide it in the way it raises the issue that we raised now or previously gives us confidence that the court is going to rule in that way. It will give the power back to Paul and other legislators to be able to draw districts consistent with traditional district principles, and for us to get back to a map much more consistent than what we had before. We also have our case that now has had a full trial, full statement of facts that are likewise back before the court. We'll see whether or not they're going to grant argument, but the argument in the Louisiana case will be in October, and we feel good about the direction that's going to go now. I do not see that as having an impact on our 2026 elections, but could see that moving forward. I do think, particularly, we see this redistricting issue around the country going on right now with both red and blue states, and yet what Texas may do and California may do does not develop the same legal scrutiny that what Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia do. I think Justice Kavanaugh has said pretty clearly from the bench at one point in time that we treat everybody from the same standard, and that's all we're asking them to be able to do for us. So it's a very long way of saying I think we're encouraged about the direction it's going and being able to get back to where we were. There is another case involving challenging state senate districts where we had a federal judge say one of ours was okay and asking Montgomery to another to be drawn, and that one right now is still in the middle of litigation. I think you're going to see the governor weigh in on that this week. By the way, y'all, that I can tell you a little bit, and been a public servant. While a wonderful question to get is not the best Rotary question I've gotten, because when I became DA, I was a single man. First time I spoke to the Applicable Rotary, first question out of the box was, DA, why did you break up with that pretty girl? So, that one I was not prepared for that. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
When I was in school, we studied all the things you talked about this morning in classes called civics. But I don't think those kind of courses are taught today in some of the schools.
Yeah, I can tell you that, but I should have acknowledged Paul's leadership in the halls of Montgomery. He is a tremendous leader, and I give our legislature credit. We got tackling some of those issues recently, and in fact, putting some teeth into the law that allows for some accountability there. But it's sad, and I think y'all, in some ways, you can draw some positives from COVID. Bear me out here. But I think it revealed to many, not only in Alabama, but across the country, what was going on in some of our school systems. Why I think you've seen a rebirth of parents engaging in what's going on in students' education. But I think, and it's part of the reason why I share this today, it just seemed like a message for Rotary is that this group collectively appreciates this flag and what it means. And I think we have to make sure that we're passing that down to the generations to come. And uniquely, anybody here other than me remember the bicentennial training? Okay, a couple of, so, I mean, that was a big deal, I think, as a kid, and I don't think I was 13 or 14 when that came through. And we did a good job as a nation, I think, talking about who we are, where we came from then. And this 250th anniversary, I just kind of want to put it on your radar screen, gives us a chance to do this for our young people. We are a nation that remains that beacon for others around the world. The freedoms that we have are way too often taken for granted. It's why, and sometimes I get asked, for example, I'll give you an example. The question I get asked is, why do we engage in matters outside of the state of Alabama? You know, for example, why are we spending time writing a brief that may involve another state or another individual in another state? So, example could have been Pensacola, many of y'all may know, Veterans Park. There's a cross there. And we had some on the left that attacked the fact that that cross was placed on public property, saying it was against the Constitution. And Alabama led the charge in my tenure as AG to say, no, it's absolutely appropriate. Because number one, that's a fundamental principle that I think we have an obligation to be able to defend. But also, it is also protecting Alabama when similar challenges may come to us. We'll make sure we get the law right. Or in the state of New York, recently we submitted a brief, I think it was in the last couple of weeks, supporting a group of Amish families there that had a religious exemption and exception that is appropriate to vaccine requirements for their kids. And the state of New York is trying to eliminate their ability to express that strongly held religious belief about vaccines. And we've led the brief to be able to say they have the right to be able to get an exception there. Our Constitution should be able to allow for that. Again, not within our borders, but I think it's a fundamental proposition that we need to be standing up for constitutional principles like that, because we think that ought to be the law of the land. And so, again, sometimes you may see those things and wonder, is it appropriate use of our resources? Those are areas where I think that we ought to be engaged and ought to have a voice in those places. Well, this is the quietest Rotary Club I've ever seen. Y'all, with that, I think I started with this, but I want to just say it. The men and women of law enforcement have tough jobs, and not that everybody else in here doesn't. But I think about all that they see, all that they are required to deal with, and particularly my sheriffs here, you know, they got to do everything from being the guardian of a person who doesn't have another family member, making sure they're going to the doctor's office, to arriving on a scene in which loss of life has occurred, and they're supposed to make everything right. And one of the things that I do appreciate about Alabama is I think that we support what they do, and they have a vision and a belief that they're in it for the right reasons, and communities are behind them. That's not necessarily true around the country. In fact, there are pockets of Alabama where I think as a result of the lack of community support, we've seen the bad guys be able to do bad things. And I'll tell you, one of our sheriff's colleagues in the city of Montgomery, for example, teamed up with us and Aaliyah because of the violent crime that was going on in Montgomery. It was one that we had from an AG's office. I'm not day-to-day working kind of on the streets with local law enforcement, but they were demanding that our capital not be in the news in the way that it was. And frankly, very similar to what we've seen President Trump and his actions right now in DC. Because when people think about the state of Alabama, they're going to think about Montgomery first, just because number one, it's on its history, but also it's our state capital. And as a result of the leadership of the law enforcement there in, I think, a little less than 160 days, they had over 450 arrests. They served almost 1,000 outstanding warrants. They seized 8 different types of drugs off the streets, countless illegal weapons, and lock switches that were removed. And we saw a dramatic decrease in violent crime in that city. And it's, number one, because of the leadership and the work of law enforcement and surging in the communities, but it's also the fact that they were willing to do it. Now, it made our judges have to work with the pardon officer dockets, right? And that's okay. But they made a difference. And y'all, if we live in this world of red and blue, but if there are things that we should all have unanimity around, it's in this fundamental belief that everyone deserves the right to be safe in their home, their own communities. That shouldn't be a political question. And I saw that dramatically in Montgomery as a result of what they did. Number one, a woman brought us cookies to the office to say thank you. So come on now. Anybody that feeds you means that they're happy. But I had a woman that called me on the phone to say, I've lived in Montgomery all my life. The community was harmless hit. And she said, for the first time in a long time, I feel safe to go out on my front porch and to be there at night and not worry that I'm somehow going to be shot or that my family's not safe. And that is a testament to the work that my brothers in law enforcement do. And while a big believer in term limits, my time in working with them is coming to a close in the next 18 months. And I can tell you, there'll be some sadness with it, because for the last 30 years of my life, I've had a chance to be able to work with them so that we can provide justice, for example, the families of JB and Tracy. And what they've given me the privilege to do is similar to after the trial of the one in Ozark, Carol Roberts, Tracy's mama, give me a hug. And y'all, she's a little bitty woman, and I wasn't sure she was gonna let me go. And she whispered in my ear and said, the first time in over 20 years, I can sleep. And y'all, that's what they do. And gentlemen, again, thank you for that. Your sheriff, I think, is getting close to being the longest tenured in the state. The only thing I found wrong with him is I think his allegiance is somewhat outside the state for his football team. Maybe not, Sheriff. I don't know if you have that LSU or anything like that. But very, very grateful for all they do for us and what they do for this community. So thanks for letting me share with you. Thanks for being with you today.
Thank you, Simone. Appreciate it very much. Just want to reiterate, thank you to all the law enforcement officials, judges as well. Thank you so much for what you do. I know it's more than what any of us can really grasp is involved. Thank you. Next week's program will be Kirk Pinky, Rotarian, Mike Sledge, and brought to us by Bill Goodwin. Would like to mention we do have 2 new proposed members. We may have seen in the email. They'll be eligible for induction on the 22nd. McDowell Pinker and Ryan Deaton. Thank you to everyone who helped today. All board members, we do have a meeting directly after this meeting at the Hill. If you will, please stand and we'll repeat the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do,
Is the truth. Is the fair officer. Will do generation officer.
Looking forward to seeing everyone next week. Bring a friend, and sing serve.